Hi, I'm Ravi Soundarajan.
And I'm Balaji Paremi.
We are the co-authors of the Inventory Snapshot Fling. Inventory Snapshot allows you to take a vCenter inventory, snapshot its hierarchy and configuration, and then create a Power CLI script out of that inventory. You can then use that Power CLI script to reconstruct that inventory either on the same vCenter server or on another vCenter server. We found a lot of different use cases for it. For example, suppose you have a vCenter 4.0 and you'd like to migrate your hosts to vCenter 4.1. Well, rather than going through the laborious task of recreating that inventory by hand, you snapshot the vCenter 4.0 inventory, take the script that we generate, run it against vCenter 4.1, done. There's a lot more use cases. You can look at the Fling's website and see the video. Please download it and give it a try. Thank you. Welcome to our Inventory Snapshot Fling. Our Inventory Snapshot Fling allows you to take a vCenter inventory, make a snapshot of it, and then reproduce it either on the same vCenter server or on a different vCenter server. We also allow you to reproduce individual data centers or even, if you'd like, clusters. In order to run our Inventory Snapshot Fling, there are two prerequisites. First, you must have Java installed. As you can see, I have Java version 1.6, update 23 on my particular Windows box. Next, you need to install the Power CLI. As you can see, let's just do the command get Power CLI version. I am running the VMware vSphere Power CLI version 4.1 U1. Okay, so how does this work? Well, I downloaded the zip file from the Fling website and I unzipped it. I unzipped it into a directory in C:/temp. As you can see, here's the zip file right here. After I unzipped it, it ended up in its own directory, Inventory Snapshot. I simply go into the Inventory Snapshot subdirectory and I double click on, if I'm running in Windows, on InventorySnapshot.bat. InventorySnapshot.bat brings up a UI. Now, I'm going to apologize in advance. It's not the world's most sophisticated UI, but hopefully it's usable, and I promise that if you send in your comments, we'll make a new one for you. Anyway, in this UI, I'm going to put in the vCenter server name. This vCenter server, in this case, I'll just put in the IP address. And this is actually going to be the same vCenter server that I'm displaying through the VI client right here. As you can see, I'm running vCenter 4.1. I'm going to put in a username. And in the final text field here, I'm going to put in the directory where I'd like to place the data. So let's put it in C:/temp/ and we'll just give it a nice name, named after the inventory, and we'll just call it, I'm doing this at 8 p.m., so we'll call it 8 p.m. Okay. So now what's going to happen after I take the snapshot, it's going to create a bunch of data files and a Power CLI file that I can run to reproduce this inventory. It's going to put those in the directory that you see on your screen right here. Okay, here's the output of Inventory Snapshot. There are 4 tabs. The first tab shows you a representation of the Power CLI code that we have generated. We generated this Power CLI code by using the Web Services SDK to log into your vCenter server and to capture information about data centers, clusters, resource pools, etc. And using that, we created a Power CLI file that you could use to reproduce that inventory. Now, there's one thing missing from this Power CLI file. As you can see, in order to reproduce an inventory like this, I would need to add hosts. Okay? And in the Power CLI, you can see I'm adding the host name, but since I don't know the username and password, I can't get that kind of stuff from the vSphere SDK, obviously. I put in placeholders for the username. In this case, I just call it root. And for password, I put password. Well, in the Host Information tab, I allow you to change the passwords that are in the generated Power CLI file. You have 2 methods of doing this. First, you can simply edit the passwords in place. Let's just pretend for the sake of argument that this has no password. Okay, and then I would hit the Commit Changes button. And now, as you can see, we've generated a new Power CLI file. It's in the same path as the previous Power CLI file. And it's called create inventory-password modify.ps1. Now suppose you have the same password on every host. I'm not saying that's particularly secure, but let's suppose you have that. And if you don't want to type in their usernames in every single box, you can just go to this text field right here, type in the username, type in the password. In this case, let's just pretend the password were password. When I type commit changes, you can see that every host's password will be updated. Now, I'm going to actually use let's, for the sake of argument, assume that they have no password. And as you can see, now we've generated a new file in the same directory, and it's called createinventory-passwordmodified.ps1. Terrific. Okay, next, suppose you want to inspect your inventory. What I do in the Inventory Tree tab is I show you a representation of your inventory. As you can see, we have a data center called AppCloud. If you expand this, you can see that it adheres to the vSphere inventory model. Unfortunately, this is perhaps not the most intuitive way of viewing it, but if you look in the host folder, under the host folder, you can see here's our cluster. AppCloud cluster, yes, that's exactly what I have here. If we expand that, you can see the four hosts that we've got, 4 hosts right here. You also see that we have our root resource pool, and underneath that resource pool, we have the resource pool RP1, just as we see in this inventory. And underneath that resource pool, of course, we have 2 VMs, exactly as we have here. In addition, we expand this child resource pool, and we have its 2 VMs right here. Let's move this over and expand the screen so this is more obvious. So, as you can see, we have faithfully rendered this inventory. Now, what you can do is, imagine you want to create a Power CLI file for just this data center. You know, maybe you want to take this data center and reproduce it on a different vCenter server. What you can do is click on the data center, and well, first of all, you have to unexpand. Let's unexpand the data center. Sorry for the clunkiness here, but okay. When you click on the data center, you automatically select everything underneath it. When I hit Commit Changes, now it will tell me which data centers and which clusters I have selected to be restored. And so what will happen is that in a moment, I'll show you how this will create 2 files that have Power CLI scripts that will recreate just that data center and just that cluster. So let's hit OK in the dialog box. Now I'll go to Generate Power CLI Code. Remember what I've done. I have changed the passwords by going to the Host Information tab. Okay, I have declared that I'd like to archive this particular data center, so I've clicked on it in my inventory tree. And then finally, I'll generate the Power CLI code. Notice what it will do. First, it will generate a Power CLI file that captures the entire inventory. And by default, that's called createinventory-passwordmodified.ps1. In addition, it will create Power CLI files for the data center and its component clusters, as I showed you from the inventory tree. So once we press OK, it'll say, hey, I just created a Power CLI file for the cluster compute resource or cluster named AppCloud cluster. Okay. In addition, it creates a Power CLI file for the data center. Remember that we had clicked on the data center and it automatically clicked the data center and its compute cluster. Terrific. Now, what we should be able to do is to look in C:temp, and we will see our snapshotted inventory. Here it is, right here, 10.115.147.8 p.m. If we do a little bit of navigation in here, here's what we see. There's a number of binary files that we use to archive the information in your inventory. In addition, we have the Power CLI script createinventory.ps1. Now this is the original script that we generated that just has root and password for the username and password everywhere. When we modified the passwords, we created a file, the UI created a file called createinventory-passwordmodified. In addition, as you'll recall, we clicked on the data center in the inventory tree right here. And in clicking on that data center, we thus hit Commit Changes and generate a new Power CLI code right here. This created additional files. Namely, it created a file for just that data center, createinventory-datacenter-appcloud1, and it's AppCloud in this case. And it also created a Power CLI file for just the compute resource underneath it. You see it has a cluster here, and that's what this file is named after. So, okay, so what's the bottom line? What did I just do? Well, I archived this inventory. Now, suppose I want to reproduce that inventory. Suppose, for the sake of argument, I'm not sure, I want to blow away the database on this. Maybe the database is old, and I just want to play around a little bit. Well, one option I have is, let's go ahead and remove. This would normally be a scary operation, but trust me, it won't be that bad this time. You have a good view of what the inventory hierarchy looks like, and it's going to go ahead and remove everything. Okay, we're back. As you can see, my inventory is completely empty. Let's go ahead and reproduce it. To do so, I'm going to need to pull up a Power CLI shell. Right here, I've got a Power CLI shell, and as you can see, I'm already connected to this vCenter server. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to execute the Power CLI script that we just generated from the UI. Remember, that was located in c:temp. It was named after the server. And in this case, it's going to be 429.11. It's going to be 10.115.147.40 at 8 p.m. And remember, the script to reproduce the entire inventory is create inventory -password modified. Okay, now let's go ahead and press it. And as you can see, it's creating the data center that we had before. It next creates the cluster that was sitting under that data center, pardon me. After it creates the cluster, it goes ahead and adds the hosts that were attached to that cluster. And for safety purposes, we add all of the hosts serially. In future versions of the product, obviously, we hope to speed it up. And I should also point out that we haven't spent a lot of time optimizing this, so its performance might not be up to what you... It might not be as good as you want, but I promise you we're working on it. When you add a host to a cluster, obviously any VMs that were already on that host get added. And as you can see, that's exactly what happened in this case. After we had the host where dummy VM test 9 resides, that VM automatically got added to the inventory. As we add the additional hosts, their VMs automatically get added to the inventory as well. Again, we apologize that this is such a slow process, but again, we are trying to make improvements as days go by to make things faster. Okay, as you can see, all of the hosts, 3 of the hosts have been added. We're now going to add one more host. What's going to happen next is as soon as all 4 hosts have been added, it's going to create resource pools, then it's going to move VMs into the appropriate resource pools. Okay, it's created a resource pool. Goes ahead and moves VMs into that resource pool. Voila. Now there are going to be some benign error messages that get emitted. You don't have to worry about them. If you're actually scared, you can feel free to email us and we'll confirm that they're in fact benign errors. And voila. We'll just check the Power CLI window. And as you can see, we're done. Again, these are benign errors. You don't have to worry about those. We've just faithfully recreated an entire inventory. This is the power of InventorySnapshot.